let's look at whatever else research we have and see if there's A, reason to worry about oppositional tolerance, and B, is there any other types of new data that gives us reason to worry about the long-term effects of antipsychotics. We're just going to go around and see whatever information we can find, okay? Well, first, there were cross-cultural studies done by the World Health Organization in the 1970s and 1980s, and they compared outcomes in the U.S. and 6 other developed countries, and I'm pretty sure Denmark was one of the countries, and I'm going to mispronounce the city. Is it Aarhus? Okay. I think that was one of the communities in the study, and they compared them to outcomes in India, Nigeria, and Colombia. One study was 5 years and 1 year was 2 years. By the way, it was this data that was also which began my interest in investigating this whole study. You can see what they found. Each time that they found where outcomes were better in the poor countries of the world, specifically India and Nigeria. You'll see this second one. Being in a developed country was a strong predictor of not attaining a complete remission. That actually was the finding. Again, when I was writing for the Boston Globe, I said, why would living in a developed country be a predictor that you won't have a good outcome? Because my understanding at the time was we were making great progress in understanding the biology of schizophrenia, and we had these new drugs. So why would it be a predictor of a poor outcome? And you'll see, by the way, the good social outcome as well. They were working, that sort of thing. Now, after the first such study, which obviously stung Western researchers, the WHO investigators came up with why would this be? They came up with a lot of possibilities. And one of their hypotheses was maybe the reason for the better outcome in the poor countries was that the patients there were more medication compliant. So they took their antipsychotics more regularly. Now that's an understandable hypothesis. If the medications are supposed to be essential treatment, then greater compliance should lead to better outcomes, right? So they measured in the second study, which was a 2-year study, medication usage. And what they found in the poor countries, specifically the 2 countries that had the best outcomes, India and Nigeria, they used the medications very differently. They used them short-term but not long-term. Okay? And you'll see here, only 16% regularly maintained. And if you actually read the study, even that's too high. It was probably more like 10%. Whereas in the US, Denmark, and other developed countries, that was a standard of care. So in other words, in this WHO study, you see better outcomes where they're using the drugs differently and they're not maintaining everybody long-term. And then they go back 15 to 20 years later and they look at the patients in those studies and you see there's a dramatic difference. And one of the dramatic differences is look at the percentage that are employed and look at the percentage that are not asymptomatic. You had a lot of people that had a schizophrenic time. Now I don't have this slide, but there's a new study out, a new international study that compares outcomes across, it's 11,000 patients, 37 countries. It's done by Eli Lilly, the manufacturer of Zyprexa. Do you call it Zyprexa in this country? And the idea of this study was to show that Zyprexa is better than the other antipsychotics, okay? That's really the purpose. Now in this study, though, there's something notable. Everybody is maintained on drugs for 3 years, so there's across these different cultures. And now the outcomes in the developing countries are no longer better than in the developed countries. But it's not that our outcomes have gone up, it's that with this new model of care, their functional outcomes have gone down. And so their functional outcomes are actually now worse than they are in the developed countries. So all I'm saying is we had earlier cross-cultural studies where outcomes were better in poor countries where they used the medications differently. They've now standardized use, and now their functional outcomes have come down.